Hey there. Well, first of all, thank you so much for sticking around. I really appreciate it, and I'll do my best to keep us going. I know we're near the end of the day, so a couple things. One is that I really will try to have it where we can ask you a little bit throughout this too. So I just want you to, don't be bashful, just go ahead and shout it out if that's the case. And I guess without further ado, we'll try and get started and have a little fun together. Okay, cool. So this is my 5-second version here. So our little brilliant experience does really, we have a psychology background, so really try to understand an audience and go from doing the early research to strategy for new product innovation, things like that, and iterative design, build, test, learn. Okay, cool. And yeah, we have all these cool clients. Very nice. Okay, now that's really done. So let's talk about our talk. So what I'd like to start with here is just this notion that, think about this, that, all of us UXers are generally the kind of people that, actually really try to have empathy and really trying to make the world a little better place. And, we can see possibilities of, wow, we can make things better. And so, these are all really nice. And so, kind of in your fortune should be a little bit like this. And so I have these ones in my wallet. I don't know about yours. But, it's a great thing, right? We're all sunshine. So a funny thing happened on our way to eternal bliss. And so, sometimes I have experienced on at least one occasion that maybe some of our ideas that we share aren't always welcomed with all of the team members we have in our midst. And I didn't know, is there anyone else who's ever experienced that? Okay. Well, okay, I was going to say good, but I guess that's not really good, but you get the idea. And okay, so we share that bond, so I'm with you. And so why is it that these things we're not really welcomed? And other people I think have experienced this kind of thing too. These are a couple samples from the UX drinking game, and so yeah, more cats. Like, I don't blame people who drink for more cats, okay? But so there are lots of things that people are experiencing, and we know this. And so if you don't know this, you just Google the UX drinking game, and it will give you an infinite supply of these if I get boring or anything like that. Okay, great. So let's start by thinking about how it is that we're treating our colleagues and how we represent them, because we're pretty good at empathy, we're pretty good at understanding what's in someone else's mind, what it is that they're trying to accomplish and their goals and so on. And so, if you think about the different people who you might be working with, and if it's like a small startup, you might be working with the very most senior people, if not, maybe senior managers, and we can kind of have equivalents here, for each one of these. So, if we have someone like, the C-suite executive kind of person, when we interact with that person, there might be a certain way, just when we look at him for a second that we kind of have this knee-jerk reaction, right? And so I would never think this, but some people might think, something like, so I don't know if you're having trouble reading that writing, but that says pompous asaholus. And so, it's, sometimes you get that kind of feeling, right? And so, anyway, I didn't mean to make you cough, but yeah, so, this kind of stuff happens. So, if you have a product owner, right? So I don't know if any of you have this kind of thing, but, you might have I've got here randomness decisionosaurus, right? So sometimes that's the species that you have that you're working with, and you're like, gosh, why didn't we make those decisions? Why? And so and we'd like to do better than that. And by the way, these are random pictures I took from Yahoo that were permissible to share and so on. And so these people did not actually necessarily act in this way. So I just wanted to protect the innocent here in case you meet any of these people. So, we have the VP of marketing, and sometimes, when we meet that kind of person, you might see the species that's the delusionist of grandioronimus. And so, sometimes we see this kind of thing. Have any of you experienced one of these species? Okay, good. So, and then, there's the developer, right? And, it can't be, has to have stickers on the back of their computer, of course. But so this developer happens to be the no-can-do-a-pod or the condescending Smirkosaurus. So there are a couple of possibilities there, okay? So I just wanted to make sure you understood. These are the kind of people that you can be exposed to if you're young and you're just starting out. I just wanted you to know that some of these people exist out there. Has anyone met any of this breed of this species? Okay, good. So, well, good. No, it's good in the we share a bond way. Okay. So fair enough. So that doesn't always help, right? So we have these amazing UX superpowers, right? So we understand people and get empathy and so on. but yet we're so good at not doing that with our colleagues, right? So I want to talk to you a little bit today about how it is we could actually be a little bit more insightful in actually using some of the skills we have that we use every other day in the lab or other places to think about these people from that perspective and see if we can do better really for ourselves, but also for them and ultimately the things we're making. So anyway, so try not to call your CEO, it's not going to really help. So okay, so here we go. So if we want to go and be, so I have 2 girls, so I'm allowed to have a rainbow unicorn in my slide deck. If we want to go from just being that usability tester to actually being that insight generator for what could be next in our space, or you want to just inform a product to informing what that product roadmap should be, where we should go, and so on, or feeling like you're the utility player of, oh yeah, let's call in the the UX guy or woman, to more like a strategic advisor. So let me ask you this. How many of you feel in some cases like you're in the column to the left there of those things? So just like, okay. And how many of you feel like you've nailed it, you're on the right there? Okay, well, you're in the wrong talk. Okay, everyone else is great. Okay, cool. So it's okay if you go, I understand. Okay, cool, but how do we get you onto that right side, right? That's what we want to do. So I think I have some ideas here. And so what I'm saying is that I have a roadmap for you of, through the different trials and tribulations we've had some success moving up the chain a little bit as we're working and a little brilliant experience. And I'd like to tell you some of the things that I've also heard elsewhere as well. And so we're going to go through and talk about how you demonstrate value, how you actually empathize and evangelize with your colleagues, and eventually get more embedded in the system in the right way. And then lastly, get to this, our I don't know what you call that, higher level, higher plane of becoming the strategic partner. So that higher point of enlightenment, I guess I was thinking of. Okay, so that's what I want to talk about for the next little while. And hopefully that's clear. And feel free to take slideys if you feel so inclined. But I actually wanted to say, too, that first link on there actually takes you to the slides that are actually available on SlideShare right now. So you could also just go and look at them yourself. But hopefully it's more fun to be here with us. So let's see here. There we go. OK, so one reasonable question is, OK, John has this roadmap. I'm sitting here, and it's comfy, so I might as well stay. But really, what is it about this that, why should he be telling me this as opposed to anyone else? And so it's true that I have been around the block a little bit, and because we're a consultancy, we see lots of different organizations, large and small. We work with a lot of really big groups. I guess we're working with like Bloomberg and Thomson Reuters and Capital One, places that have a lot of levels, and technology groups as well. And so we actually do have experience in this kind of thing, and I have spent time at a fascinating gig once where a big healthcare site, actually, the CEO decided that he was going to be the web designer. And so my job was to keep him from driving this thing off a cliff. And so I had to kind of gently coax him. But I think we've worked with more senior folks and presented to them, things like that. So I have been exposed to this kind of situation. And I think the last thing I was going to mention is that I'm sort of standing on the shoulders of giants. So to the right there is a thing called Dollars to Donuts, which is one of the podcasts that exists that is one of the great things that Steve Portugal does. And actually, a lot of them actually in these things talked about how we started from having one person in a lab, and that was me, to now I run this whole big thing. And how did we get there? And what happened? What were the stumbles along the way? And how did we get in? And actually, a lot of the things they said really, really resonated with me, too. And so I just wanted to say that that's another piece of evidence that we were trying to use for this as well. So I encourage you to take a look. Cool. There's another thing called the UX podcast. That's pretty good, too. OK, cool. So let's talk about this first step here. So if we're going to demonstrate our value. And really a lot of the groups and what I've seen too is if the very first time that you've got UX, it's actually, so let me ask you. So how many of you were able to just come in and, yeah, we need UX to lead this project? Okay, wow, okay. So nice work. Give that guy something. Where's the drinks? Okay, but that's one out of our whole room here. So I guess what I wanted to do is try and say, okay, what are the ways that we can get started? So actually a number of people said, and I felt the same way, was let's create one person called it the usability SEAL team. And it's true that we might not train, I know despite my physique here on the stage, we might not train as much as true SEALs do, and they do very important things too that I won't try to compare myself to. But I think the notion of how they work, of being dropped in, right, figuring out what to do in limited time, limited resources, having to adapt to whatever I get, whatever kind of users I get and so on, get some data and get out and keep moving like you were never there, often happens, right? And I think that a lot of these groups said, hey, if we could just demonstrate some value quickly and start to be very concrete and recognize that really helps. So this notion of the SEAL team and just, we're going to do this with as many people as we can get, and we're going to make it happen. We're going to make it happen in a time frame that surprises people and so on, I think can be really valuable. And so literally, in concert with that notion of the SEAL team, having this light footprint and big impact was that some groups actually mentioned, so how many of you have done any sort of research and turned it around within 4 days? Nice. Okay, so this notion of like totally shocking people that, hey, sometimes they come up to someone like me and they're like, oh, great, Dr. Whalen's going to come and now he's going to do 6 months of research and then we'll hear a report, 18 months later, and that's going to be really useful. Thanks, guys. But yeah, if we can shock them into, do the shock and awe of, hey, we actually got something done here too. I think that's something that can be actually really valuable here, is to show them the stealth with which we can do things. It doesn't have to be, I know that's not perfect, but it's a way to demonstrate what's we're capable of. Actually, another notion that I wanted to mention was this notion of, typically we say, okay, here's what we found. So you can do this 2 ways, right? Here's what we found, good luck, right? If you do a usability study. And that somehow feels a little unsatisfying to me. But one of the ways that someone said this very eloquently that I agreed with was, we could say, yes, change it to exactly this. But another way to say that is to say what the user was really trying to do or what the audience really needs is something in this realm. And so having sort of the aspiration, it has to eventually accommodate these characteristics. So you're not actually telling a designer, for example, that it has to be exactly this way or this font or this size or this place. And so it's a little bit more saying, hey, you're a partner, and here are the characteristics I'd like this solution to have, and that will be acceptable to our audience. And I thought that was a nice way. It's a subtle twist, but it's a way to not say, we're going to start bossing you around as soon as we showed up at the party. So I think that actually that's a really nice way to do that. I actually agree with the pick your battles idea, too. I don't know if any of you have young kids, so you learn really quickly that you ought to just let it go a couple times, and then the things where they decide they're like going to push their sister into the stove, well, that's a good one that we're going to pick as a battle. But the other ones, I think we might let go. And so I think the last thing is this notion of measuring the impact of what you've done. So saying, okay, if we could say, let's suppose this saves everyone in our company of 10,000, 2 minutes every week, then okay, what's that worth to our company? And actually have the people who are the stakeholders help you to make that number. So it's not really your number, it's the team's number. And suddenly that makes it more valuable. So all these little subtle tricks of just releasing a little bit of the tension of you being introduced and also having it where your value is a little clearer as well. Okay, so that's one. And I actually wanted to mention, so I want to go back to our drinking game there. This is one of the things that was on there. And it said, so if your behavioral research is rejected because it lacks statistical significance, drink. And so have any of you had this, anyone say anything like this? Okay, yeah, I had the like, what? You're not testing 300 people. Well, how can we know anything? Come on. And so fair enough. And I think that's when actually, what was your response to that? How do you come back to this? Just shout it out. Yeah, go for it. Okay, it's a discount study. We're not going to get statistical significance. Okay, what else?
Cite the common sample sizes for usability testing and why we use what we use.
Okay, so cite some of the empirical evidence about sample sizes and why we would use the kind of size we're using. That would be quite different. Okay, go ahead. Were you going to say something?
Yeah, it only takes 12 people to read a sentence.
Oh, it only... I like that. It only takes 12 people. Well, okay, I don't like the actual consequence, but the notion is that you only need 12 people to sentence someone to death. So isn't 12 people enough for a usability study to send our product to death? So, okay, so well, we won't debate the former, but we can debate the latter. Okay, at least in our talk today. Okay, fair enough. So you've got some strategies here, and I think those are actually reasonable ones. The other thing I was going to say is when you start to do this, so if you're kind of starting out or you're trying to build, cred, one of the other things is just that I really believe in is this notion of so it says oversharing, we really mean share, but I think this possibility to, share the raw notes, share the videos, make sure that those things are available. It was actually really fascinating to hear these massive companies or hugely successful startups like EndNote. No, it's not EndNote. Okay, what's the one with the elephant? Evernote. Thank you. Sorry, coffee. So okay, Evernote. Let's all talk about Evernote. I can talk about EndNote, but that's Thomson Reuters. Okay, Evernote. Okay, so how do you think, if you're not from there, you can be quiet, but if you're not, how do you think they store, what sort of technical sophistication do they use to store all their videos and all their notes and the other things that the team had and sketches and that kind of stuff? Okay, well, Evernote was a good guess. So they actually, the funny thing is actually one group has Evernote and one of them uses a wiki. But I guess the key point is that in any of these things, it can be this incredibly simple, mundane tool, but it's all there and it's searchable. And just those two characteristics were the things that made it really successful. So anyone who wanted to could go back and look at what happened, or they could look at it from a different perspective, or the marketers could say, oh, I didn't realize there's actually something useful here. Who knew? And so there's that piece. How many of you actually right now, when you do some sort of research or you've got a new evolution of a product, you send out like kind of a blast of here are the big takeaways from what we've done recently? Nice. So a couple of you, but a vast majority didn't. And so I think I'm probably often guilty of not doing that as well, but we've started. And so the idea is, okay, even if you just get the flyby of something happened from this team, so that's a good thing. And the other thing is here are some concrete positive outcomes, and it's easy to share that too. And even if I'm an executive, I can understand 4 bullet points. So I think, sorry, did I say that in a condescending way? I apologize. Someone who's so busy they could hardly look at their phone could even get that. So I think the point there is that very much we should just make sure it's a little bit of advertising of what you're doing and the accomplishments you're making. So I definitely encourage that. The other thing I've got here is this notion of sharing up, where we really want to make sure that 4 bullet points get sent to not just the key stakeholder here, but the person who's that person's boss and that person's boss's boss. So we really do try to share it up so they say, hey, this interesting stuff is going on. If they did it for this group, maybe they can do it for that other group. And so, and one of the things that I have been accused of before is I do research, and then someone says, wow, John, that is great. You just found what we already knew. And so have you ever had anyone tell you that? Yeah, okay, good. Well, I'm not alone. So actually, I raise my rates every time someone says that, so just be careful. But actually, someone from Comcast, actually, Liz Cal is super nice if you ever get a chance to meet her. But, she said that, hey, someone told her, we already knew that, but you actually humanized it for her. You really made it, feel the pain of that user and understand and actually have a little bit of empathy for them. So I think there are lots of things that are known, and you've got this elephant in the room, and if you can bring it to light in a new way, in a way that's a little more compelling, we absolutely want that. So just keep that in mind. With taking the time to do those little video clips and other things can be really helpful. How do you try to, is there any other way you try to share what you're doing with your colleagues? Go ahead.
Just invite them into the process.
Okay, so invite them into the process. Excellent. Go ahead.
I use metaphors.
Oh, metaphors. Okay, so she said, I use metaphors. It's like a sunny day with a... okay, wow, okay. I'll work on that. Anything else? Okay, good, let's move on. So the last thing I was going to say in our first step of just getting in the door and getting us rolling is that almost to a T, the people that, when I've been doing this with a new client, and also what I heard from others and what I've heard from my colleagues in other groups as well, is just to get started, we're not going to be picky. We're going to go ahead and get some people into what we're doing, whether it's iterative testing, whether it's design thinking, we're doing 5-day sprints, we're doing usability testing. We go ahead and invite teams to give it a try, get them in, find out who those other teams are, who the team lead is, see if we can convince them, give their team pizza so they're willing to play ball, And just kind of get in there a little bit and have us people know a little bit more about you and be welcoming and realize that you actually generally don't bite. And it's only in those certain circumstances with certain species that you bite. So, but I think the last thing is just, we very much try to, sneak in something that's much more thoughtful, like, hey, here's what could be next, based on some other quips that people said. And even if we were just testing one item or one piece of an interface, we could talk about something much broader as well and just mention that that's a possibility. So we definitely try to remind everyone that, hey, there's a little more to us than what you asked us for. So just keep that in mind. And I think that's really helpful. So overall here, I've got that we're going to literally try and demonstrate our value. I think often with usability is a good way to start, or doing things like fast iterations or sprints and so on. But this was where we're going to be incredibly adaptable. We're going to try to actually overshare what we're doing and just make sure we're trying to grow the influence that we have in the people who even know we exist, whether that's sharing up with our emails or actually just finding out who those other people are in your organization. So if you're I guess I've always been shocked at how many times, so I met someone recently actually, and I had dinner with her. And we actually, our team helped to redesign the business side of PayPal.com. And so that was one of the things we did. And she said, no way, you were the people that did that? I always wondered who it was. And she, of course, was a career PayPaler, right? And a UXer. And so how we never crossed paths is just like amazing, right? But it happens in these big organizations. So that's why I really encourage you to be a little bit more broad and shooting broader that way. Okay, that's my first thing to get us all started. And so what would we do for what do you do to empathize and to evangelize what you're doing right now? Okay, how about evangelize? What is it that you are doing to try and let people know you exist on the map? Sure, go ahead.
Offering free work.
Oh, offer free work. Okay, wow.
Within your organization.
Oh, within your organization, okay. I was going to say, I've got a couple ideas. Okay, go ahead. Yeah, brown bag or lunch, right? Come on in and check this out, and free food. Okay, excellent. Go ahead.
I talk to everyone who's a new hire about what the design team does.
Okay, so literally talking to new hires about, so whether they're in design or not, what the design team does. Wow, that seems dangerously logical. Okay, good. Oh, sorry, remind your developers. Oh, yeah, okay, I'm in for this one. So this is, we're going to bring our developers for a drink and let them, socialize a little bit and just, learn a little bit more about our culture and what we do and so on. Okay, excellent. Okay, good. Well, let's see what we can do with a Smirkosaurus here. Okay. So one thing that I think is so important is, you discover what's in someone's head, how it's working, what they're really trying to think about, what they're feeling. And often we don't do this kind of thing for the organism that is our company. And so I really think that seeing, so the org chart is, so how many of you have an org chart, but really there's somebody else who's really in charge? Okay, yeah, right? And so we want to know who is it that really rules the kingdom here. So literally, how are these decisions being passed down? Who is the person who's like, so for example, there's a group I work with that will remain nameless. I really won't tell you. But the most senior person is just like, okay, that sounds good. And the person under them is the one who's really making this all happen. And so it's that person you need to know. And you need to figure out who that is by just chatting. And actually, the drinks are actually a great way to make that happen. It doesn't have to be alcohol, but we have to just talk to people more casually and find a way to do that. I think the other thing is literally in your company, or your organization or who the group you're consulting for, what is it that's actually getting, so virtually, okay, so nothing is getting measured. Just as long as you're going public soon, that's fine. But almost always you have to have something measured in order to make sure the wheels are turning. And so you have to figure out what it is that your department and the department you're working with and their boss is getting measured on. So we actually find it really helpful to hear so what's the bonus structure like at this corporation? And so actually just understanding how it is that, will the person who was the end signatory to we're going to do this, sign off on this project and get it rolling, what is going to get that person their bonus? Because that's the thing that's going to actually make everyone happy. And so So, and that's what they're going to be willing to put a little more money into if it really needs it, or a little more energy and thought and so on, and make sure it doesn't get stomped out, and make sure it goes forward. So how many of you know how your boss's boss gets their bonus? Nice. Congratulations. Good job. Okay, good. So it's worth doing. It's worth checking this out. And I think the other thing is, actually, so there is one group we occasionally admit that we work with them, the IRS, and they actually had a product where they were going to say, my IRS, which was going to be a new login system. And so the only problem with that is it was about the time when there was that issue with a flu virus, right, MRSA. And so it was called MRSA. And so, wow, that was a great success. And so, you know, the last thing I want to do is go into that place and say, hey, I've got a great idea. Let's make a My IRS. And they'll all be like, wah, wah. So we want to know what, there was another group that said, whatever you say, John, you can say anything you want. Do not ever speak the words phase 2. Because phase 2 means it was certain to die and will never see the light of day. And so, you know, I didn't know in that organization that was such an incredible, you know, hot button issue. So knowing what's failed or what people are freaked out about or what's collapsed right before you is actually really, really helpful too, right? So anyone else had that? So I don't know, do you have a similar situation? Anything that we need to mention with that? Okay, well, I definitely think it's worth thinking about these things that you don't usually about. How is that person, you know, a couple floors up actually getting their bonus? So I really encourage you to think of it from that perspective, and that's what they're driving for, and the more you sound like you're driving for that too, the more they're like, shit, we need more of them. So, okay, good. The other thing that I think I heard from some of you, like, you know, saying as people come in, you're letting them know a little bit, is just truly actually just making sure people understand these things. So, so actually, do any of you share with people who are not in your sort of UX realm what like design thinking is, or UX, or any of these kind of things? Okay. So a handful, right? But not that many. And I don't think it's just that you're tired because at the end of the day. There just aren't that many people who are doing that. And so the very first thing I've got here is the reality show. What do you think the reality show is?
Giving them real insight into what you do on a daily basis.
Oh, giving them insight into what you really do on a daily basis? That's actually a really good guess, and it's wrong. So anyone else have any ideas what the reality show would be? Go ahead.
We create a construction reality that doesn't really exist and shows the last-minute horror stories we usually have to deal with.
Okay, so actually something about showing the horror stories of what we have to deal with. Okay, for this group, and we've done it before too, is just literally making sure you've got these clips of here is your signature product, and here are people using it, and who are, you know, the buyer or the, you know, senior executive that needs to use it all the time, and here's what this person said, you know, and what they did and what they threw, and, you know, what they did next. And so we really do try to say, here in real life is your product being used. And I don't know if you actually experienced this before, because you know it perfectly because you made it. But here's what other people do. So the reality show is actually just little clips of, okay, here's the next time someone tried to buy and they got stuffed and couldn't get, you know, to make that purchase happen. Or here's the next time someone tried to do a search and they got like garbage out of the search and didn't get what they were looking for at all. And they're like, oh, I'm just going to Google it then. And like, oh, that subscription software you've got, that better work better than just having them say, I'm just going to turn that off and go to Google. So, so actually, I think it's really valuable to make sure, and then you just sneak those links into that top 4 bullet points, say, oh yeah, we made a video clip too, if you want little highlights. And that thing gets passed around your company like anything, and people will be laughing, but then the person who actually is getting that bonus is not so happy by that and tries to make things happen. So I really encourage that. Literally, we've had, so how many of you actually work in like an agile or design, you know, iterative test and learn kind of situation? So lots. Okay, so how many of you think that the people who are the developers really deeply understand how you get to fit into that? So there were snickers in the front, just to give you a sense of what the answer was to that. So we'll leave it there. So definitely, I think, actually, how can you exist in that environment and not hurt the Fibonacci numbers they're doing, or however you're doing your sprints? And I think, actually, to our point earlier, just literally how getting a small bit of data, I'm not saying that 5 is the magic number, but more just how a modest amount of data gets you to a why. And so having that massive amount of other analytics or anything else you have might not be as valuable as getting that little bit from that to then get the reality show from those 5 people. And lastly, just, well, okay, so we have this UX group. So they're the group in charge of slowing things down, right? So what is it they can actually do to make things better? Okay, so let's give you, and I'll show you a couple of things in a sec. The other thing is actually we really try to get people to understand how are we working. So not every single, actually, yeah, how many of you have a group that, you know, where, so for example, some of these people have like research labs, for example. So how many of you have more projects than you can handle with your team as it is today? Oh, come on, everyone. Okay, so if that's the case, we have to give them some sort of way to keep moving without you, right? What are the best tools there? And I'm going to give you some ideas there too. And so really, I think in this case, it's truly telling them, you know, okay, if you want to actually meet with a user, so in this example I've got is doing a little bit of research on your own, and okay, we'll give them let them give that a try. We'll definitely want to coach them. We'll definitely want to ride along shotgun. But if we have done that, then maybe we can get them to, you know, what does it mean to build rapport? They don't really understand they have to do that. What, you know, what kind of questions should we ask? So, what actually, have all of you had a stakeholder come with you and ask some questions of the participant? What are some of the more choice questions you've heard them ask? Go ahead. Oh, do you want it this way or do you want it that way? I like that. Okay, that's good. Go ahead. Oh, yeah. Would you use this? Right. Would you pay? How much would you pay for this right now? Yeah, excellent. Okay, anything else? I actually had someone ask, do you really like it? Like, do you really, really like it? Like, seriously, no, really. Do you really, really like it? Yeah, actually, way in the back. Go ahead.
Wouldn't you say that ...
Yeah, nice. Wait, right. I have this idea in my head. Is it not true? Yeah, okay. Okay, nice. So, you know, we have to teach them a little bit that maybe those aren't the most, well, you can, oh, I'm so sorry, one more. Oh, yeah, why aren't you doing it this way? Right. Did you know there's this button over here that'll solve all your problems? Okay, okay, good. Yeah, no, I've never heard that. I just made that up. So, yeah, definitely there's that. And also I think, so there's this radical thing there that says let participants answer. And I think that actually is perfect with your quote there. So this is like ABC kind of things, right? We just want to let them actually make some progress too. And I think the thing that we often fail to do is literally say, here's how you can get us started, or here's how you can get us to do some stuff with you. So literally, how many of you have a way that they can initiate some sort of work with you, or like they have some sense of how much time it takes and stuff like that? You do? Okay. So a couple, but you're like, so it's ironic. I have groups come to me and they say, okay, we really want to do this with you, John. Well, what do we do to get you in the door? Like, do we like pay you right away, or do you? And the answer to that is yes. But no, I think it's true that often they really don't understand how to engage your team, whether you're a consultant or not. So even just how do you sign up for it and win the prize of the UX team, you really need to make sure they understand that if they haven't worked with you before. Okay, so this was just one example here. I'm not saying this is the right way to do it, but even just to say, hey, here's one way that UX and Agile might, an Agile group might work together. And so, hey, we're going to do a little bit of research ahead. You do your sprint 1. We'll be there for you for sprint 1. But while we're doing that, we're going to look at some research for the next one. How's that sound to you? And so, even I'm not saying this is perfect, but even just giving them a sense of, oh, this could happen without massively slowing down our iteration sprints and cycle and stuff like that could be really, really helpful. Okay. And also just recognizing that, hey, we understand some of the things that you're worried about. And so, we just want to make sure you understand. So actually, do any of you have a sign, anything like this? Has anyone actually, or I should ask this, should I change the number? Has anyone died because you didn't have a spec? Okay, fair enough. So I know it's kind of making fun of it, but it's also telling them that it's going to be okay. And so I think that having a little bit of lightheartedness in this might be helpful. Okay, cool. So the other thing is just literally trying to tell them, hey, this is why you should care, right? So why it matters to do this. So this says translate findings, and by that I mean, hey, we need to make sure that so actually, what's some UX speak you've heard today that your product owners would not understand? Oh, come on, really? What's that? Journey maps. Okay, yeah, we're going to make a journey map. Wow, it sounds like Wizard of Oz. Okay, we're off to see the wizard. Okay, anything else? Contextual inquiry. I think that's a good one. Go ahead. Right. Oh, it is it? I had no idea. Yeah. Sorry, that was ethnography, or yeah, doing anthropological study. Go ahead. Affordances. Sure.
We should probably leverage progressive disclosure to blah, blah, blah.
Okay, we should probably leverage progressive disclosure in order to do blah, 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 blah. Yeah, so we speak in this tongue. So actually, we don't have as many people in the more agency side of things, but has anyone heard the word, and it's not actually my personal favorite, but I'm willing to utter it today just for you, delighters? Okay, so, sorry, you heard delighters? Oh, okay, you came out with it, okay. Okay, oh, you heard it, okay, fair enough. So, but just there are all these weird terms we use, and can we just actually tell them what it means and what the value is of this stuff, right? Have any of you done an immersion room? So it's really simple. Let me tell you what I'm talking about. Maybe you've done something similar. Where literally usually we like take over somewhere where there's food, right? So that's where you can put up personas. You can put up, here's what we did with the questions. Here's what the other group did. We have the iPad plugged into the wall there and, making sure that no one takes it away. But, so they can actually play those videos and talk about it over the coffee right there. So it's literally just trying to get them into feeling, here's what we experienced with this audience, and here's what they're thinking. Here was their top requests. Here's the quotes they had. Here's actually pictures of these people, and here's where they work as opposed to where you work. I loved, there was one group I worked with where you walk past the free food and the reflecting pool with the koi pond, and then you go left at the beach volleyball court, and then you get to their glimmering office. And they actually worked with people who had like a laptop that was like that thick, and it's from 2002. And the screen this big, and all the people who are working there have like the awesome monitors that are like, and so just having that reality check of here's how this person does this and stacks boxes to sit down. That's not their Aeron chair, that's their boxes, and understand the difference between the two. So having them be a little bit immersed into here's the real life of your audience and users actually can be really good. Have any of you tried anything like that?
It's different in the war room.
Oh, a war room. Okay. Mm-hmm.
We did some persona research, and we actually built a living room for our demographic in the office, and then we had a trivia contest at an off-site restaurant.
Nice. Okay. So here we are. Here we had actually a living room built into the office just for this purpose of personas and recognize these personas, and then they actually did a trivia question test answer thing at a local eatery or winery or something like that. Okay, cool. And the last thing is just making sure that people actually get some of that real video. I mean, we find it so powerful to just have people watch what really happened so they don't have to believe us. And I think that's really valuable as well. And lastly, some person mentioned this already, but we absolutely try to take different people into the field every single time. So, and this is actually from some of the people at HFI, and Susan Shank had done a series of talks and had just literally what are all the things that this could impact, right? And so even just recognizing that these are some of the things that we could measure and test and improve and what the value of these things could be, I think is really important as well. And literally you can go ahead and do some plugging in of stuff, right? And just say, yeah, well, let's see, it cost you to, what, $17,000 for this first study, and we could improve $2 million worth. Do you think that's a good, ROI? Is that, So, I think that, just showing them, hey, some small impacts that seemingly small can have a huge deal, and just recognizing that as well. So sometimes just literally showing it in dollar signs, right? Some people, that's what they really want. They don't really want to, well, okay, they might want to help someone sometime and might be someone other than themselves. But I think that the important thing there is just what is it that they find the most valuable and what's the needle they're trying to move, and just make sure you're thinking from that perspective. Okay, cool. Okay, so if we've actually understood our org chart, who's the boss's boss, how do they get a bonus, making sure that people who are coming in actually understand a little bit of what you do and literally how they can get you to help them and what that would look like and how it could be possible and how it might not be terrifying. We might not kill anyone without a spec. And we've translated the findings and we're sharing it up. then maybe we'll make some progress here. So, so let's talk a little bit about how you get into there and really start to sink your teeth into what you're doing. So we definitely say that it's really important, I think, to go and meet those key leaders. And so you've heard my out and about, so I'm Canadian, so I had to have this slide. But you know, literally, what are the decisions they're trying to make? And if you can kind of talk to them in a friendly tone, then you can literally be like, hey, what are you working on right now? What do you have to decide? Okay, well, how long before you have to make that commitment? Okay, 2 weeks. Okay, fair enough. That's not great, but that's what we got. And you know, if you didn't have this data, what would that risk for you, right? What's a bad thing that could happen? And literally trying to offer, here's what we can do in that time frame, and here's what we would like to do, but here's what we can do in that time frame. And so they get to pick, so it's not your choice, it's theirs. Here's, you know, the best way to help you with that outcome. So it's literally trying to help them solve their problems, just like you do for anyone else in your designs. So I think that kind of like helping those people actually solve problems for them and say, wow, I've got like a consultant, who knew it? And actually a partner and advisor is great, and just getting them to think from that perspective, and the next time they have a problem to come after you too. So we definitely, you know, heard a lot, and I have too, about just literally getting people in. How many of you actually have a team that sort of, so if you're a consultant, you're already like this, but or you have a team that sort of, you're the, almost the consultants within the organization. Okay, and how many of you wind up in a product line? So you're doing this, and we drop 1 or 2 UXers in that. Okay, so a little bit of a mix. And so I think definitely what we try to do as much as possible is, first of all, say, here's what we think we can accomplish, and make sure everyone knows that, so they're not like, oh yeah, he's going to like transform this, it's unbelievable in a week. We're really going to try to make sure that we actually have you know, stakeholder progress reports, that we're actually doing something. Here's what we're doing in your team. And also just making sure that whenever we present stuff, I really, really try, if we've got some research or other things, to, despite my love of being up here on the podium, to actually zip it for once and let someone else present what happened. So they don't have to trust me, they can trust their colleague who's been around forever. And I love it when the developer says, listen, you know, I actually thought this stuff was like a bunch of crap. Then I went and saw what they were doing and how much they were struggling with this. Guys, we need to put this in the next iteration, like seriously. And you know, if you had said those words, they'd be like, oh, nice, yeah, I'm a Smirkosaurus, no. And so I definitely try as much as possible to get other people to present this work for us. Okay, cool. So which is the deceptively clever part of these 3 points here? 1, 2, or 3? Okay, you're voting for 3. Okay, well, I think that's actually a good idea too. I actually really like that we're providing regular stakeholder progress reports. That means we get to talk to someone who's higher up than we're normally allowed to touch, and we're actually keep telling them that stuff is happening, and did you know this is happening with your product? And one of those things is they're going to be like, what? And go down and actually say, okay, we need to fix this. These guys found it, let's get them to go fix it. So I really think that actually that number 2 is actually really important. Just keep having these little nudges of, did you see this? I've got one more clip for you. It can be super helpful. And actually, literally, you know, what we want to do, if we're at that more umbrella level, or you're the consultant coming in, okay, then we actually understand this group actually really suffers from this problem here that they're trying to accomplish, irrespective of what the users want. And they actually figure out that we can actually do things quickly for them that they might not have really understood. And also, you start to understand, okay, this thing is coming down the pike. So that means that we can actually be adaptive, and several months before have some little pilot we do and say, hey, you know, I just noticed this is the way people are looking at this thing here. Do you want to have that data? Oh, really? Because I'm just about to start figuring out how to budget for. So we want to have that in hand so we're ready to go. And just have all those, you know, that Machiavellian plan all done so we actually help our users as much as we could. And the last thing is, I really encourage you to have people who are on the ground in the sprints, in the development group for a period of time and really help them in that day-to-day thing. But I really want that person not to report to that team, because I want them to be able to say, this sucks, and it's really bad. No, it's like really bad. Guys, it's really bad. And so you really can't do that to your boss as much as you'd like to. So, okay, you can, but it's not always a prescription for success. And so we want you to be able to have that ability to really say what you're really thinking and have someone else support you from somewhere else as well if you need be. Okay, cool. And you know, one person said something like this, where, hey, I really want my UX team to be independent and able to tell people what they're really thinking. And oh, no, I'm sorry, the cold hard facts. That's a little different. So fair enough, the cold hard facts. So if they told them what they were really thinking, that might also not be a good career path. So, okay, good. And one of the things you can do is as you've been doing this testing and you're doing a little bit more, we find that we can start to say, here are some patterns that your users really understand. So they're really used to this other tool they have every day that you didn't know they have. They're really used to doing things this way. They tend to be this age, so they're of the era where this is a normal interaction pattern. So saying that here are some patterns that we've got, and what I've got here are a little bit more like design standards, not quite as much patterns of ways you can work or interact or flow, but as pictures here, because I can't share with you what I've got from my client in this case. But we really try to say to people, okay, this team should be making decisions on two things, either evidence when we actually go out and test it, or from some principles that are based on a whole bunch of testing we've done. And the other thing is that then suddenly your group has got this compendium of here are the ways you should build things faster and the ways we can be more consistent. And suddenly that starts to sound like you might even have some coherence across all your product line, which doesn't sound like such a bad thing either. So trying to sort of generate this over time through evidence that you've got makes people much more likely to support it. So, okay, so there's that. And the other thing I'd argue is that you can go ahead and actually start to add up. So how many of you have ever put together, here's all the studies we've done this year, and here's all the data together? So it doesn't count if you threw it all in box. So, okay, so I've got 1, 2. Okay, so there's few, and actually I've seen people who are incredibly successful because what they've done is they've shown, actually in the diagram I've got, I couldn't share with you exactly what I have, but the lower picture there has some dots that are a little bit like those consumer reports, like really bad, kind of okay, sort of sucky, a little bit better, really good. And we've shown that over time this thing is getting better and better and better, and it could actually be attributed to some of the things you do. Who knew, right? And so if we can show that kind of progression, and we can also gradually ask, so actually I've got some things here. Let's ask questions that various groups really love as we go along, and then we've got some pretty good amounts of data on those simple questions that we ask every time that we might not actually be as thrilled about, but it gets other people interested in our data set, and they might actually learn something along the way when they get the thing they only want. So who do you think wants to know, hey, should this, are you like, for this feature, are you like indifferent, or is this a must-have, or is it a delighter? Okay, who wants that? What kind of person in your organization? Yeah, like a product owner. I think so too. So is this awesome kind of data? Okay, I think from your stunned silence, I'm going to say no from you. And so I would argue that, yeah, I'm not as in love with that particular metric, but I think that other people find it really, really interesting. And so that's one way to get them into your data set. With this notion of, yeah, I still like this one. Hey, why do you use our product? What's the best part? Do you really like me? So who is it do you think is asking that? And you don't have to give their species name. We can just give the normal. No, who? Oh, marketing. Do you say marketing? Ah, okay, good. I was thinking marketing too. Yeah, so literally the marketing people want to know just why is it that they're really happy with the product, or what are the things that they think are the most positive about it, right? Anyway, we can keep moving, but just there can be ways that you can actually really help other people along the way by simply asking one question along the way when you're meeting other folks. Okay, cool. So if you have actually started to get these, the leader of your UX team to the leader of these other product teams relationships, so they actually feel like, wow, I've got this problem. I wonder if they could help us. Kind of relationships. We've got someone on the ground figuring out what the real life cycle is and what's coming up next and in the next 6 months and so on. We've got some ways that we've done all this testing, and we started to say, hey, here are some principles to use, and plus, here's what we're collecting so far. And then you've actually got a data set that some of the marketers and some of the quant people that are like, gosh, maybe these guys don't suck so bad after all. So, and that's a win, right? And so you might think the same thing of them. So, okay, good. So to get to our final nirvana level here, I feel like, I asked you some of the terms that you use, and so let's see, no one mentioned design thinking, no one said iterative things. I said delighter. Yeah, actually, no one said, okay, do any of you actually in the wild say the word synthesis? Some people do, so okay. Okay, fair enough. Well, I guess more our design thinking friends that do that more, but sometimes I've actually admitted to saying that word. But you know, we have all these things, and so I'm just saying that when we get to the executives, right? So we've built our way up. We've talked to these, you know, the heads of state have talked to one another, and then we've gotten our emails bubbling up, and then finally this, you know, VP is like, okay, I want to hear from you guys. I want you guys to show up and like tell me what, you know, just I want to understand what's going on down there. It sounds like there's something interesting here. And you're like, oh yeah, man, we've done the synthesis, and we've got this totally disruptive delighter that we're going to put out, and the experience journey is amazing. And you know, here's what they're thinking, right? So they're thinking like, yeah, oh, this is great, guys, great, good work, guys. Okay, yeah, love it, okay. So yeah, so we just want to make sure we speak in their terms, right? So okay, so I would not recommend you use all the words in green because this is, I think, what often other folks hear. So let's see if we can get a little past that. So we've had the chance. So I remember actually at JP Morgan Chase, we were working with the group, and we stumbled into like the like executive VP shows up in the elevator, right? And those elevators down in anyway, down near Wall Street go really fast. So we were on the 24th floor when he came in, and then you know we were going all the way up to the top, but he wasn't, and so it should have been the other way around. But you know, I just had a few floors to do this, and what is it that we need to tell that person in those few floors, right? And so literally, I think the one thing you can tell them is the last competitive advantage you've got of anything is going to be something to do with, and you know, they know the word design, right? So you might say experience, but I would argue that you should say it in the design kind of ways. And because you've collected all this data and you've got this compendium of studies you've done and other research you've got, you can say, here are the numbers we've moved. Here's how much more efficient people are. Here's the number of literally the ROI from what we've been doing so far, and some of the efficiencies that are gained. And you can't always do this perfectly, but there are little ways you can get at it. And then you can claim, here's some victories we've got for you. And by the way, did you know how much you pay UXers? This is like awesome ROI. So I think that you can tell them there's this incredible way that you can build efficiencies and make yourself more competitive. And I think if you can lastly say, and there's this other thing you're missing, if we actually got a chance to look out in front, then we could actually tell you, here are some insights of what we should build next. Here's the next innovation you might want to tackle. Here's some iterative testing we can do before we get a really expensive developers in, and get to that level. That's, I think, what I want to really tell them, is that this is a way to, actually, what else would you say? That's what I would say. What am I missing? Go ahead. Okay, so we actually, right, so if you're with the VP of marketing, you'd say, we totally get the voice of customer. VOC, man, it's rocking. And what you said is that, hey, we have customer centricity, which is a little disruptory for me, but yeah, I know what you mean in that neighborhood. Has anyone argued that this is a great insurance policy for what you're doing? Let's leverage a risk, what do you call those things? Yeah, it's sort of like a hedge, right? So we've got a hedge model here where we can reduce risk and make sure we're getting the right product, because we really are, actually. And so I think that that's the thing that I want to tell them is that, hey, if you get us out in front, it's super cheap, and we can tell you, here's, when you're deciding which way this company is going to go and what we're going to invest in, why not have some good evidence to base it on? And so we've got all this evidence we've been using somewhere else. Why not use it there, too? By the way, it's got incredible ROI in your end, even more so than some of the other ways. Okay, cool. And, I don't know, so this is a good one here. Anyone who read the HBR gets the importance of UX, but they may not translate it into, what it takes to do that. And so, so I have heard lots of people say, hey, we need customer experience. We need a great, user experience. We need to really, satisfy that CX. Heard about CX and the HBR. So HBR is Harvard Business Review, in case you're not sure. So you got to make sure you got HBR on the tip of your tongue. And so totally read the last HBR. It's awesome. And yeah, but I think the point here, though, is there's so much that's actually been spoken about UX and the kinds of things we do and the value of it that people get there's something valuable there. They just don't know how to execute it, right? So that is why you're going to start to help to get people to have some sense of user experience or design thinking, and make sure those managers actually know what you do, what its value could be, where they could plug you in, why it won't terrify the agile developers, and really start to get to these things where actually, so how many of you actually work with any of the people who do like quant kind of things, so that, large scale data samples, analytics, things like that? Okay, so some of you, but if we can actually get where you've got the sample together, so you've got a whole lot of the why of the what that they have, suddenly that's more powerful for everyone. So I really encourage you to try to get to that level of actually connecting with the analytics folks. And just to get so you can inform strategy a little bit more and get to other people understanding the value of what you do, let alone having them engage you. Okay. And we really try as much as we can to just literally, for the sales and marketing folks, actually one of my favorite studies we did, we completely redesigned a product, and when we showed them these early wireframes, we just had to roll the tape, and we saved some of the quotes people were saying about what this meant to them or what they were doing, what they felt like this could be like. And arguably that's just them talking, but the marketing people ate it up, and all the brochures said, we value our customers, we looked into what they were doing, and here's what they said about the direction we're headed. And so, which is fair, that's really what they were doing. But I think that and even having this, how many of you have ever talked to your sales folks? Well, good. Okay, more than I thought. Okay, cool. Because actually, you've got awesome insights into here's what people find frustrating, here's what their biggest pain points are, and here's how we might make things happen. So I really think that that's the last thing. Is just, we tend to actually interview not only the people who are using our product, but the people who are going to buy the product as well. So if there's a librarian or the chief of anyway, it can always be a different name. I'll let it go. But I think the key point there is that person is often hugely different, has hugely different ideas than the person who actually uses it in the end. And we want to actually interview both to really understand how to make it successful in both ways. Okay, cool. Oops, that's going backwards. Let's go forwards. And the other thing is that internally, there can be so many systems where you can tackle them, and you know this, but if you can, often those people are real numbers folks, where we're not willing to touch our internal system unless there's some really big advantage. We want to give them what those numbers would be and actually keep improving those things, because that just gets you into another layer of other people who want to think about what you're doing. So ultimately, if you can actually get into having those executives understand what these possibilities are, we can make the shift to doing a little bit more strategic work, which we really have. And then lastly, involve the rest of the company in what you're doing as well. Then almost everyone is going to come back to you for something. So really, I guess the bottom line here is that this is your future. And actually, I was hoping to have another slide, so let's try again. Okay, well, it is true. Someone says you want to add more cats to your design drink. Okay, that's a good plan. And then lastly, this is actually what I was thinking of, was just really that we want to go from demonstrating value to really having people understand what we're talking about, to getting a little more embedded in the system, to ultimately being much more influential in where your company is going. And those are the things I wanted to say. So thank you so much, everybody. Okay, so I think we have a solid 1 minute and 50 seconds. Is there any, oh yes, right here, go ahead. Oh, did I say reduce efficiencies? Is that what I wrote? I just want to make sure you were all aware, awake at the time. So I would actually encourage you probably not to do as much reducing efficiencies as maybe reducing inefficiencies. So, but this is where I just want to make sure that, so thank you for actually, look at that, you're all on the ball, this is good. Okay, so I agree on that. Other points? Questions? Oh yes, please, go ahead.
What techniques do you use to demonstrate in 4 days value of research?
Oh, so what techniques do we use to demonstrate the value of our research?
Well, you were saying that
Oh, the 4-day turnaround. Yeah, what do we produce in 4 days? Yeah. Okay, so I would argue that 4 days is probably like from the time that we finished our research, as an example. But yeah, usually in that 4 days, we can get pretty decent video clips. We can have the bullet points that we send to the executives. We can have some like major, here are the headline, things we should change, the directions that we would go in. So really often, so I always feel compelled to have an executive summary of anything I do. that's got, you know, here are the 4 ideas, and here's 1 slide per idea of what I'm talking about. And then here are all the gory details for all you product owners. And we could talk about all these screens and possibilities and service design and so on. But yeah, we try to give them that first bit, that executive summary of here's what happened, here are the major points, and here's how important these things are in terms of like, you know, desperate, urgent emergency to, you know, oh yeah, they found this is really nice, which will keep going. So just that literally like, how are we doing? Kind of temperature guide almost. Good. Okay, so what about, the question was, what about small talk and getting to know them in a different way? So, you know, if you've got that, gosh, what did I call them? Oh, actually, tell me which group you're thinking of.
Oh, I'm thinking of maybe even all the way to executive.
Yeah, okay, so what was it, this is the skill testing question. So what was the species we had of the executives? Oh yeah, I think it was the pompous ones, right? Okay, yeah. Okay, right. So anyway, that's a species that exists. I'm sure not at your organization. But okay, so what kind of things would we talk about with those people? Just literally, so in that elevator ride, how do you get started? And I think it's that sort of like, so that's when I go straight for the bonus, right? So if I know what they're going to get, I'm like, did you know we're working on this to try to achieve this goal? And here's we got a little, you know, so I'd probably go from there to, you know, what are you thinking about right now with that? And here's how we're trying to move it forward. What else are you doing? And gosh, would this be helpful for that too? I wonder. So always turning it around to, what do you think? You know, wow, is that an idea? Huh. Wow, that's a really good one. Wow, way to go. You know, you just thought of what I wanted you to think of. Okay, excellent, good work. So yeah, I definitely try to, you know, as you all do as teachers and other things, gradually bring someone into having an idea for themselves and never say it yourself. And so I think that would be my #1 suggestion. Of course. All right, well, thank you all. I think we're officially out of time, and I appreciate this so much. Cool.